The envelope arrived 50 years too late. Or maybe it arrived exactly when she needed it. Her mother had been dead for half a century, but the truth she left behind was still alive. Have you ever learned the truth too late to say thank you? The envelope arrives on a Tuesday. Myron is 68 years old, and she's learned that Tuesdays are quiet. The mail comes late. The house settles into itself. The world moves slowly enough that she can pretend it isn't moving at all. She's sitting at her kitchen table in Hollowmere when Evren, the postal worker, knocks twice and leaves a single piece of mail on the porch. She hears the footsteps retreat. She hears the gate creak shut. She waits 3 full minutes before she rises to retrieve it. The envelope is plain, cream-colored, aged to the color of weak tea. Her name is written in faded ink across the front. Not Myron Hale, the name she's carried for 47 years, but Myron Ashford, the name she left behind when she married. Her maiden name. She stands in the doorway, the cool October air brushing her face, and stares at the handwriting. It's familiar in a way that makes her chest tighten. Looping letters, gentle curves, the kind of script that takes time, that refuses to be rushed. She closes the door softly behind her and returns to the kitchen table. The mug of black tea she poured 20 minutes ago has gone lukewarm. She wraps her hands around it anyway, grounding herself in the rough ceramic, the faint warmth that lingers. The envelope sits in front of her now. She doesn't open it. Not yet. Instead, she turns it over. The postmark is smudged, barely legible, but she can make out the year if she tilts it toward the window. 1974. 50 years ago. 50 years. And the post had finally caught up. Her hands tremble. It's a small thing, just a flicker in her fingertips. A faint tremor she tries to suppress by pressing her palms flat against the table. The wood is cool and grainy beneath her skin. She focuses on the texture, the way the grain runs in long, uneven lines, the way her hands look older than she feels. The clock on the wall ticks unevenly. It always has. She bought it at an estate sale 30 years ago, and it's been off rhythm ever since. Tick, tick, pause. Tick, tick, pause. She's grown used to it. She doesn't hear it most days, but today she does. The room smells of bergamot and old wood. The tea steeps too long, bitter now, but she doesn't pour it out. The mustiness of the envelope mingles with it. Paper that's been sealed for decades, holding its breath, waiting. She traces the handwriting with one finger, slow, careful. The ink is faded, but the curves are unmistakable. Her mother's hand. The memory arrives unbidden, slipping through the cracks in her composure like light through old curtains. She's 18 again, standing in the doorway of her mother's bedroom, watching Calla write letters by lamplight, the pen scratching softly. The way her mother's shoulders curve forward, intent, as though each word required her full body to shape it. Myron never asked who the letters were for. She assumed they were for friends, for relatives scattered across distant towns. She assumed they were unimportant. She was wrong about a lot of things back then. The envelope crackles when she picks it up again. The paper is brittle, delicate, like dried leaves. She holds it to the light, squinting, as though she might see through it without breaking the seal. But the contents remain hidden, secret, patient. She sets it down again. Her heart is louder than the clock now. She can hear it in her ears, a dull rhythm that refuses to quiet. She can feel it in her throat, thick and insistent, pressing against her voice, though she hasn't spoken aloud in hours. The silence between her breaths stretches, long, deliberate. She counts them without meaning to. 1, 2, 3, 4. On the 5th breath, she reaches for the envelope again. Her fingers slip beneath the flap. The adhesive gave up decades ago. The paper lifts easily, whispering as it folds back. She pauses. Her hand hovers over the opening. Her pulse thrums in her wrist. And then, slowly, she pulls the letter free. The paper unfolds in her hands. The ink is faded but still legible. Her mother's handwriting fills the page, line after line, each word deliberate and careful. Myron's eyes blur before she reads the first sentence. She blinks hard, forcing the tears back, but they come anyway. Soft, hot, unwelcome. She doesn't read it yet. Not fully. Not now. Instead, she folds it closed again, careful not to crease it further, and lays it flat on the table beside the envelope. Her hands press down on either side of it, steadying herself, anchoring herself to the wood, to the room, to the life she's built in the 50 years since her mother left. 50 years. The phrase echoes in her mind, heavy and immovable. 50 years since Calla walked out the door with a single suitcase and no explanation. 50 years since the call came 6 months later, telling her that her mother was dead. 50 years since she stood at a funeral and felt nothing but rage. And now this. A letter. A message. A voice from beyond the grave. The clock ticks. The tea grows colder. The light through the window shifts, casting long shadows across the table. And Mirren sits, motionless, her hands trembling against the wood, her breath shallow and uneven. She doesn't know yet what the letter says. She doesn't know yet what it will cost her to read it. But she knows, in the way you know a storm is coming before the sky turns dark, that nothing will be the same after this. 3 days pass before Mirren moves the letter. She doesn't open it. She doesn't read it. She simply shifts it 3 inches to the left, making room for her tea mug, and then pretends it isn't there. But it is. The envelope sits on the kitchen table like a silent witness. She circles it when she pours her morning tea. She avoids it when she sets down her plate at lunch. She rearranges the salt shaker, the napkin holder, the small ceramic dish that holds her rings. Anything to give her hands something to do that isn't touching the letter. By the 3rd day, she stops eating at the table entirely. She takes her meals, standing at the counter, leaning against the cool tile, her plate balanced in one hand. She drinks her tea in the living room, perched on the edge of the armchair her father bought 40 years ago, the cushions still firm because she never sits long enough to soften them. The house in Hollowmere is the same one she grew up in. 2 stories, narrow hallways, windows that rattle when the wind picks up. The wallpaper in the dining room is faded. Pale roses on cream, the pattern so familiar she stopped seeing it decades ago. Dust motes drift through the afternoon light, suspended in golden beams that slice through the lace curtains. She's lived here alone for 23 years since her husband died. Before that, it was the 2 of them. Before that, it was her and her father. Before that, it was her and her mother. And then it was just her. Isolde visits twice a week. Her daughter lives 2 towns over, close enough to check in, but far enough to have her own life. She comes on Tuesdays and Fridays, bringing groceries, asking gentle questions, sitting with Mirren at the kitchen table. Except this week, Mirren suggests the living room instead. It's cozier, she says, and Isolde doesn't argue. Mirren has spent the last 47 years as a librarian. She retired 8 years ago, but the habits remain. Order, silence, a place for everything. She catalogued other people's stories for decades, shelving them neatly, returning them to their proper positions. Fiction on the left, history on the right, biographies in the back corner where the light is softest. Her own story she kept to herself. She's always preferred it that way. Neat, contained, nothing left unresolved. Except now there's a letter on her kitchen table, and it refuses to stay contained. On the fourth day, she tries to return to her routines. She wakes at 6. She brews black tea. She eats toast with butter, standing at the counter, staring out the window at the garden. The garden. It sprawls behind the house, a tangle of overgrown weeds and forgotten pathways. Once, it was beautiful. Once her mother tended it with the same care she gave to everything, deliberate, patient, unhurried. Roses bloomed along the fence. Lavender lined the stone path. Herbs grew in neat rows near the back door. Myron hasn't touched it in 50 years. She tells herself it's because she doesn't have the time, because her knees aren't what they used to be, because it's easier to let it grow wild than to fight it back into submission. But the truth is simpler and harder. She can't bear to tend something her mother planted. The earth smells rich and damp when she steps outside after breakfast. The air is cool, sharp with the promise of rain. Birdsong drifts from the trees at the edge of the property, distant and unhurried. She walks the perimeter of the garden, her hands tucked into the pockets of her cardigan, her eyes scanning the tangle of growth without really seeing it. Somewhere beneath the weeds, her mother's roses still grow. She knows because she's seen them. Brief flashes of pink in the early summer, thorny stems poking through the undergrowth. Evidence of survival, even when untended. She turns away before the thought can settle. Inside, the house is silent except for the creak of floorboards under her feet. She moves through the room slowly, touching the furniture as she passes, the back of the sofa, the edge of the bookshelf, the door frame between the hall and the kitchen. The letter is still there. Of course it is. She pauses in the doorway, her hand resting on the frame, her gaze fixed on the envelope. It hasn't moved. She knows that. But somehow it feels closer than it did yesterday, as though it's crept toward her while she wasn't looking. A memory surfaces, unbidden and sharp. She's 18. Her mother is standing in the hallway, a single suitcase in her hand. Myron is shouting. She can't remember the words now, only the tone. Anger, betrayal, the raw, ragged sound of a heart breaking in real time. Her mother doesn't shout back. She just stands there, silent, her face pale and unreadable, and then she leaves. 6 months later, the call comes. A car accident. Instantaneous, they said. She didn't suffer, they said. Myron didn't cry at the funeral. She stood at the graveside, dry-eyed and distant, and told herself she'd already grieved, that the worst had happened the day her mother walked out the door. She told herself she'd made peace with it. She was lying. The letter knows. She turns away from the kitchen, her breath shallow, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. She climbs the stairs to the second floor, her footsteps heavy on the old wood. In the bathroom, she washes her hands with lavender soap, scrubbing until her skin turns pink. The scent is too strong, floral and cloying, but she keeps washing anyway. When she looks up, her reflection stares back at her from the mirror. 68 years old, gray hair pulled into a loose bun, lines around her eyes that weren't there a decade ago. She looks tired. She looks like her mother. She dries her hands quickly and leaves the room. By the 5th day, the letter has become a presence. Not just an object, but a weight, a gravity. She feels it pulling at her even when she's upstairs, even when she's in the garden, even when she's lying in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, counting her breaths. 3 days, then 5. The letter doesn't move, but Myron does. Around it, away from it, never toward it. She tells herself she'll read it tomorrow, or the day after, or the day after that. But tomorrow keeps arriving, and the letter stays sealed. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the layers of control and order and carefully constructed peace, Myron knows what she's avoiding. Not the letter, the truth. Isolde arrives on Friday as she always does. She carries a canvas bag of groceries and a small bouquet of chrysanthemums, their rust-colored petals still damp from the florist's cooler. She sets them on the counter in the kitchen, humming softly, and begins unpacking bread, milk, apples. Mirren hovers in the doorway. "Mom," Isolde says without turning around. "You don't have to stand there. Come sit." Mirren doesn't move. Isolde glances over her shoulder, her hands stilling on a carton of eggs. Her gaze shifts past Mirren, into the kitchen, and lands on the table, on the letter. "What's that?" she asks. Mirren's throat tightens. She forces her voice to stay even. "Just mail." Isolde sets the eggs down, gently, and crosses to the table. She doesn't touch the envelope, but she leans close, reading the faded handwriting, the postmark, the name. When she looks up, her expression is soft, concerned. "That's Grandma's handwriting," she says quietly. Mirren nods. She can't speak. Isolde straightens, her hands resting on the back of a chair. "How long has it been sitting here?" 5 days. "Have you read it?" "No." The word hangs in the air between them, heavy and final. Isolde doesn't push. She never does. She simply watches her mother for a long moment, her eyes searching, her mouth pressed into a thin line. Then she steps away from the table and returns to the groceries, her movements deliberate and calm. "Maybe it's something you need to hear," she says softly, folding the empty canvas bag. Mirren doesn't answer, but the words follow her long after Isolde leaves. They echo in the silence of the house, in the creak of the floorboards, in the uneven ticking of the clock. Maybe it's something you need to hear. She spends the rest of the afternoon in the living room, a book open in her lap, the pages unread. The light fades slowly, golden to gray, to deep blue. She doesn't turn on the lamps. She sits in the growing darkness, listening to the house settle around her. When she finally climbs the stairs to bed, it's past 10. She lies awake for hours. Sleep, when it comes, is thin and restless. She dreams of hallways that stretch too long, of doors that won't open, of her mother's voice calling her name from another room. "Myron!" Soft, insistent, just out of reach. She follows the sound through the dream, down corridors that twist and fold, through rooms she doesn't recognize. The voice is always ahead of her, always fading, always just beyond the next door. "Myron!" She wakes with a gasp. The bedroom is dark. The clock on the nightstand reads 3:14. Her heart hammers in her chest, loud and uneven, and her skin is damp with sweat. She lies still for a moment, staring at the ceiling, listening to her own breathing. And then she gets up. The floorboards are cold under her bare feet. She doesn't bother with slippers. She moves through, the house in darkness, her hand trailing along the wall for balance, her breath shallow and quick. The kitchen is bathed in moonlight. It spills through the window above the sink, pale and silver, casting long shadows across the floor. The letter sits on the table, untouched, exactly where she left it. She stops in the doorway. Her hands are trembling again. She presses them against her thighs, but the tremor doesn't stop. It moves through her fingers, up her wrists, into her arms. She can feel it in her chest now, a fluttering, restless thing that won't be stilled. She crosses the room slowly. The chair scrapes softly against the floor when she pulls it out. She sits. She stares at the envelope. The moonlight catches the faded ink, illuminating her mother's handwriting, those careful loops and curves she remembers so well. Her breath hitches. She picks up the envelope with both hands. The paper is cool to the touch, brittle and delicate. She holds it for a long moment, her thumbs pressed against the edges, her eyes tracing the lines of her name. Myron Ashford, the girl she used to be. She slides her finger beneath the flap. The adhesive gave way days ago, but she's careful anyway. Slow and deliberate, as though the letter might disintegrate if she moves too quickly. The paper unfolds in her lap. Her mother's handwriting fills the page. Line after line, steady, unhurried. The ink has faded in places, soft and gray, but the words are still legible. Mirren's vision blurs. She blinks hard, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand, and forces herself to focus. The first line. By the time you read this, you'll understand why I had to leave. The words land like a stone in her chest. Heavy, immovable. She reads them again, and again. Her lips move silently, shaping the syllables, testing their weight. And then, without meaning to, she reads them aloud. By the time you read this, you'll understand why I had to leave. But her voice cracks on the last word. The sound echoes in the empty kitchen, sharp and raw, and she presses a hand to her mouth to stifle the sob that rises in her throat. It's been 50 years since she's spoken her mother's words. 50 years since she's heard that voice, even in memory. And now here it is, written in ink that's survived decades, waiting patiently for her to be ready. She reads on. The letter is longer than she expected. 2 full pages, front and back, every line filled with her mother's careful script. She reads slowly, her hands shaking so badly that the paper rattles softly in the silence. The refrigerator hums in the corner. Her breath comes in shallow gasps. The moonlight shifts across the table, and she doesn't notice. She reads. And with every word, the world she thought she knew begins to crack. The letter isn't addressed to the 18-year-old girl her mother left behind. It's addressed to the woman she's become, to someone who has lived long enough to understand what her younger self couldn't. Someone who has survived. Her mother knew. Somehow, impossibly, her mother knew. By the time Mirren finishes reading, the moon has moved across the sky. The kitchen is darker now, the shadows deeper. She folds the letter carefully, smoothing the creases with trembling fingers, and sets it on the table in front of her. Her chest aches. Her throat is raw. Her eyes burn from tears she hasn't let fall. But she doesn't look away. She sits in the darkness, her hands resting on either side of the letter, and lets the silence settle around her. It was 3 in the morning when she finally broke the seal. 50 years collapsed into a single breath. And nothing would ever be the same. The letter begins with an apology. My darling Myron, by the time you read this, you'll understand why I had to leave. Or maybe you won't. Maybe 50 years isn't enough time to forgive what I did. But I'm asking you to try. Myron's hands shake as she reads. The moonlight has shifted, dimmer now, and she has to tilt the page toward the window to see the words clearly. Her mother's handwriting blurs at the edges, soft and uncertain in the pale light. She blinks. Tears fall. She doesn't wipe them away. I need you to know that I didn't leave because I stopped loving you. I left because I loved you too much to let you watch me die. The words hit like a fist to the chest. Myron stops breathing. She reads the line again. Then again, her lips move silently, testing the shape of the words, trying to make them make sense. I was diagnosed 6 months before I left. Pancreatic cancer. Aggressive. The doctors gave me 6 months, maybe less. I didn't tell you because I couldn't bear to see the look on your face when you realized I was running out of time. Myron's vision swims. The paper trembles in her hands. She presses it flat against the table, her palms holding it down as though it might fly away if she lets go. Her mother was dying. 6 months, and she didn't say a word. The sob rises in her throat before she can stop it. She covers her mouth with both hands, pressing hard, holding the sound in. Her chest heaves, her breath comes in shallow, ragged gasps, but she doesn't make a sound. Not yet. She forces herself to keep reading. I know what you're thinking. You're angry. You're thinking I should have told you, that you deserve to know, and you're right. You did. But I was selfish, Myron. I wanted you to remember me the way I was. Whole, strong, alive, not the person I was going to become. The ink smudges beneath Myron's tears. She tries to wipe them away, but more come, hot and relentless, blurring the words on the page. She blinks hard, forcing her eyes to focus. I thought about telling you every single day. I rehearsed it 100 times, but every time I tried, I looked at you and saw the girl who still believed in second chances. The girl who hummed while she read. The girl who braided her hair in the mornings and left it loose at night. The girl who thought the world was kind. I couldn't take that away from you. Myron's breath catches. She leans forward, her elbows on the table, her head bowed over the letter. The chair creaks beneath her weight. Her heartbeat pounds in her throat, thick and uneven. Her mother remembered. The humming, the braids, the way she used to sit by the window with a book in her lap, losing herself in other people's stories because her own felt too small, too ordinary. Her mother saw all of it, and she left anyway. I told myself that if I left quietly, you'd be angry for a while, but you'd move on. You'd build a life. You'd find love. You'd be okay. And you were, weren't you? You married. You had Isolde. You became the woman I always knew you'd be. But I also knew you'd hate me, and I was okay with that, because anger is easier to carry than grief. Anger keeps you standing. Grief makes you fall. Myron's hands tremble so badly now that the paper rattles. She presses her fingertips against the grain, feeling the texture, the roughness, the weight of decades compressed into a single sheet. Her mother planned this, not just the leaving, but the letter, the timing, the 50-year delay. She wanted Myron to read this as a woman, not a girl, as someone who had lived long enough to understand what it cost to love someone that much. I arranged for this letter to be posted 50 years from the day I mailed it. I know that sounds strange, but I needed time to pass. I needed you to have a life before you heard this. I needed you to understand that sometimes love looks like leaving. The sob breaks free. It's soft at first, barely more than a gasp, but then it grows, rising from somewhere deep in her chest, raw and ragged and unstoppable. She covers her mouth again, pressing both hands hard against her lips, but the sound escapes anyway. A low, keening cry that fills the empty kitchen. She hasn't cried like this in 50 years, maybe longer. Her shoulders shake. Her breath comes in short, sharp bursts. Tears stream down her face, dripping onto the table, onto the letter, smudging the ink further. She doesn't care. She keeps reading. I thought you'd be angry. I thought you'd try to stop me from going. I thought you'd fight me, and I wouldn't have the strength to fight back. So I left while you were out. I took a single suitcase and walked out the door. And I didn't look back because if I had, I would have stayed. And staying would have broken you. Myron's chest aches. Her throat burns. She can barely see the words now through the blur of tears, but she doesn't stop. She can't. The doctors were right. I had 6 months. I spent them in a small town by the sea, in a house I rented with the last of my savings. I watched the water every morning. I thought about you every night. And when the end came, I was alone, just like I planned. I don't regret it, Myron. Not the leaving, not the silence, not even the loneliness. Because you got to live. You got to be whole, and that's all I ever wanted for you. The final lines are shorter, simpler, as though her mother was running out of time, or strength, or both. I loved you enough to let you hate me. I hope, by now, you've forgiven us both. With all my heart, Calla. The letter ends. Myron sits in the silence that follows, her hands still pressed against the paper, her breath shallow and uneven. The moonlight has dimmed. The refrigerator hums. The clock ticks, uneven and persistent. 50 years. She'd spent 50 years believing the wrong story. 50 years thinking her mother left because she didn't care, because Myron wasn't enough, because love had limits, and she'd reached them. But it wasn't abandonment, it was protection. Her mother didn't leave because she stopped loving her. She left because she loved her too much to stay. Mirren leans back in the chair, her hands falling into her lap. She stares at the letter, at the smudged ink, at the careful loops of her mother's handwriting. And for the first time in 50 years, she lets herself feel it. Not the anger, not the bitterness, not the carefully constructed peace she told herself she'd found. The grief. Raw, bottomless, inevitable. The grief she never let herself carry. Mirren doesn't move when the first light comes. She sits at the kitchen table, her hands resting on either side of the letter, her breath slow and shallow. The darkness lifts gradually, gray at first, then pale blue, then the soft gold of early morning. The light spills through the window above the sink, casting long, gentle beams across the floor. Dust motes drift through them, suspended and slow, turning in invisible currents. She watches them without really seeing. Her body aches. Her eyes burn. Her throat feels raw, scraped clean by the sobs that tore through hers hours ago. But the tears have stopped now. What's left is a stillness so deep it feels like standing at the bottom of the ocean. She picks up the letter again. The paper is soft now, worn thin by her hands. The ink is smudged in places where her tears fell. The words blurred but still readable. She smooths it flat against the table, her palms pressing gently, carefully, as though it might tear if she's not careful. She reads it again. I loved you enough to let you hate me. The words settle differently this time. Softer, heavier. She lingers on them, her lips moving silently, testing the weight of each syllable. Her mother didn't leave because Myron wasn't enough. She left because she was. The realization doesn't arrive like a revelation. It arrives like a tide. Slow, inevitable, pulling everything loose inside her and rearranging it into something new. She reads the letter a third time. Memories rise as she does, not the ones she's carried for 50 years. The anger, the silence, the funeral where she stood dry-eyed and distant, but older ones, quieter ones. The kind she buried because they hurt too much to hold. Her mother teaching her to bake bread on Sunday mornings. Flour dusting the countertops. The smell of yeast and warmth filling the kitchen. The way her mother's hands moved, quick and sure, kneading the dough with a rhythm that felt like a heartbeat. Her mother singing while she hung laundry in the garden. Old songs Mirren didn't know the names of. Her voice drifting through the open window, soft and off-key, carrying on the breeze. Her mother kissing her forehead before bed. Every single night, without fail. The press of lips against her skin, warm and brief, followed by a whispered good night, my darling. Myren closes her eyes. The memories don't hurt the way they used to. They ache, yes. But it's a different kind of ache. Not sharp, not cruel, just present, like pressing on a bruise that's finally starting to heal. She thinks of Isolde, her daughter, her fierce, gentle, patient daughter, who visits twice a week and never pushes, never demands, never asks for more than Myren can give. She thinks of how fiercely she loves her, how she would do anything to protect her, how she would break herself into pieces if it meant keeping Isolde whole, and she realizes with a clarity that feels like light breaking through fog that her mother felt the same way. Her mother didn't leave because she was cruel. She left because she was kind, the cruelest kind of kindness, the kind that costs everything. Myron's hands flatten on the table, steadying herself. The wood is cool and solid beneath her palms. Real, grounding. She presses down, anchoring herself to the present, to this moment, to the light filling the kitchen and the silence settling around her like a blanket. She reads the letter a fourth time, then a fifth. By the sixth reading, she's no longer crying. By the seventh, her breath has slowed. The anger that lived in her chest for 50 years, sharp and immovable, the thing she built her life around, begins to soften. Not disappear, not dissolve, just soften, like ice cracking in spring. She folds the letter carefully, smoothing the creases with both hands. The gesture feels ceremonial, reverent. She traces the edges with her fingertips, memorizing the texture, the weight, the way the paper feels fragile and enduring all at once. Forgiveness, she realizes, isn't something you give once. It's something you rebuild, slowly, in the spaces grief left behind. Maybe love isn't always soft. Maybe sometimes it's the hardest truth someone can give you, and it takes a lifetime to understand it. If you've ever carried a story you thought you knew, and then learned you were wrong all along, stay here with me. Subscribe, because some truths arrive exactly when we're ready to hold them. The birdsong starts outside, soft at first, tentative, then louder, more insistent, filling the silence with something alive. Maren listens. She listens to the birds, to her own breathing, to the rustle of the letter as she folds it one final time and sets it on the table in front of her. The kitchen feels different now. Not empty, not haunted, just still, the kind of stillness that comes after a storm, when the air is clear and the world is quiet, and you realize you're still standing. She thinks of her mother in that small town by the sea, alone, watching the water, thinking of her daughter every night. She thinks of the letter, sealed and posted 50 years ago, traveling through time, waiting patiently for the exact moment Myron would be ready to receive it. And she thinks of herself, 68 years old, sitting in the house she grew up in, finally understanding what it means to love someone enough to let them go. By the time the sun rises fully, she has read the letter 7 times. Each time the anger ebbs a little more. Each time something else takes its place. Not peace, not yet, but the possibility of it. The light fills the kitchen now, golden and warm, spilling across the floor, across the table, across her hands still resting on either side of the letter. She doesn't move. She just sits, breathing, listening, letting the morning settle around her. And for the first time in 50 years, she doesn't feel alone. Myron stands at the back door, her hand resting on the frame, staring out at the garden. She hasn't stepped into it in 50 years. Not once. The plot sprawls behind the house, a wild tangle of the weeds and overgrowth, vines climbing the fence, brambles thick enough to hide whatever lies beneath. It's been abandoned so long, she's almost forgotten what it used to look like. Almost, but not quite. She pushes the door open. The hinges creak. The cool morning air rushes in, carrying the scent of earth and decay, of things growing and things rotting, all mixed together. She steps outside. The ground is uneven beneath her feet, grass grown tall and damp with dew. She walks slowly, carefully, her hands hanging loose at her sides. The garden stretches out before her, chaotic and unkempt, nothing like the neat rows and careful beds her mother used to tend. She stops at the edge of the old rose plot, or what used to be the rose plot. Now it's just a mess. Weeds as high as her knees. Dead vines twisted around rusted stakes. The stone path her mother laid decades ago is barely visible beneath the tangle. Myron kneels. The dirt is cold under her knees, damp and soft from yesterday's rain. She doesn't care. She presses her palms flat against the ground, feeling the texture, the coolness, the way it gives, slightly under her weight. She hadn't touched this earth in 50 years, but it remembered her hands. She begins pulling weeds, slowly at first, one stem at a time. Her fingers close around the base, tugging gently until the roots give way. The dirt clings to her skin, dark and wet, collecting under her fingernails. She pulls another, then another. The rhythm is meditative, repetitive. Pull, toss, pull, toss. Her breath steadies. The wind picks up, rustling through the leaves of the trees at the edge of the property. It's a soft sound, almost soothing, like the whisper of something she can't quite hear. She keeps working. Her hands move faster now, more certain. She clears a patch of ground, revealing the dark soil beneath. It smells rich and alive, earthy and sweet, tinged with the faint decay of autumn. And then she stops. Her fingers brush against something hard, rough. She pulls back the weeds carefully, gently, uncovering what lies beneath. A rosebush. The stem is thick and gnarled, twisted from years of neglect. The thorns are sharp, cutting into her fingertips when she touches them. But it's alive. She can see the faint green beneath the bark, the small buds starting to form at the ends of the branches. Her mother planted this 50 years ago, maybe more, and somehow, impossibly, it survived. Myron's chest tightens. She sits back on her heels, staring at the rose bush, her hands trembling. Dirt smudges her palms, her wrists, the cuffs of her cardigan. She doesn't notice. "I wish you'd told me," she says aloud. Her voice cracks on the last word. She swallows hard, forcing herself to keep going. "I wish you told me you were dying. I wish I'd been brave enough to ask." The wind answers, soft, persistent, carrying her words away. She pulls more weeds, clearing the space around the rosebush. Her movements are deliberate now, careful, as though she's uncovering something sacred. "I hated you," she whispers. "For so long. I told myself it didn't matter, that I'd moved on, but I hadn't. I was just pretending." The tears come, not the sharp, ragged sobs from the night before. These are softer, quieter. They slide down her cheeks and drip onto her hands, mixing with the dirt, turning the soil dark and damp. "I wish I'd understood," she says. "I wish I'd known." She uncovers more of the rosebush. The roots are deep, spreading wide beneath the soil. Her mother didn't just plant it. She anchored it, made sure it would survive even when she couldn't tend it, even when she was gone. Myron's breath catches. Her mother knew. She knew she wouldn't be here to see the roses bloom again, but she planted them anyway. Not for herself, for Myron. "You didn't abandon the garden," Myron says softly. "You just planted something that could survive without you." The realization settles over her like a weight, heavy, inevitable. Her mother didn't leave her with nothing. She left her with this, a garden, a rosebush, a life that could grow even when she wasn't there to tend it. Myron leans forward, pressing her forehead against her dirt-streaked hands. Her shoulders shake. Her breath comes in short, shallow gasps. But she doesn't make a sound. She just kneels there, in the dirt, surrounded by the weeds she's pulled and the roses her mother planted, and lets herself feel it. All of it. The grief, the gratitude, the love she tried so hard to bury but never could. After a long time, she lifts her head. Her face is wet. Her hands are filthy. Her knees ache from kneeling on the hard ground. But she doesn't move. Not yet. She reaches out, her fingers brushing gently, against the rosebush. The thorns prick her skin, sharp and insistent, but she doesn't pull away. "I forgive you," she whispers. The words feel strange in her mouth. Foreign, like a language she hasn't spoken in decades. But they're true. She says them again, louder this time. I forgive you. The wind picks up. The leaves rustle. A branch snaps somewhere in the distance, sharp and sudden, breaking the silence. And Myron kneels in the dirt, her hands resting on the rosebush her mother planted 50 years ago, and finally lets herself say what she couldn't say at the funeral. What she couldn't say in all the years that followed. I love you. Her voice is soft, barely more than a breath. But it's enough. The garden listens. The wind carries her words away. And somewhere, in the space between memory and presence, she feels her mother's hand on her shoulder. Gentle, brief, gone before she can turn around. But there, she stays kneeling for a long time. The sun climbs higher. The light shifts, warm and golden, spilling across the garden. Birdsong fills the air. The earth beneath her knees grows warmer. And slowly, carefully, Mirren begins to tend the garden her mother left behind. Myron spends the next 2 weeks in the garden. Every morning, she wakes at dawn. She brews her tea. She carries it outside, the mug warm in her hands, and stands at the edge of the plot, surveying what needs to be done. There's always something. She pulls weeds first, methodically, patiently. Her hands moving through the tangle, separating what's alive from what's dead. She fills bucket after bucket with brambles and dried vines, carrying them to the compost pile at the far corner of the property. Then she prunes. The rosebush her mother planted has grown wild, sprawling in every direction. Mirren clips the dead branches carefully, one at a time, listening for the soft snap of wood giving way. She's gentle with the living stems, trimming just enough to let light reach the center. She waters. She replants. She clears the stone path, brushing away years of dirt and moss until the gray stones shine in the morning light. She doesn't talk while she works, but she thinks. She thinks about her mother kneeling in this same dirt 50 years ago, planting roses she knew she'd never see bloom. She thinks about the letter, folded and safe inside on the kitchen table. She thinks about the 50 years she spent believing the wrong story. And she thinks about Isolde. On the Friday of the second week, her daughter arrives as usual, canvas bag in hand, chrysanthemums for the table. She sets them down on the counter and pauses, her gaze drifting to the window. "Mom," she says softly, "you've been working in the garden." Mirren nods. She's standing at the sink, rinsing dirt from her hands. Her fingernails are stained dark. Her knuckles ache. But she doesn't mind. Isolde crosses to the window and looks out. The garden is still wild, still messy, but there's order emerging now. The rosebush is visible. The path is clear. Green shoots are starting to poke through the soil where Myron replanted bulbs she found, buried beneath the weeds. "It looks beautiful," Isolde says. Myron dries her hands on a towel and turns. "Come sit with me." They move to the kitchen table. The letter is there, folded and worn, the edges soft from handling. Mirren has carried it with her these past 2 weeks, reading it in the mornings before she starts her work, reading it again at night before she sleeps. Isolde sits. She sees the letter, her eyes widen. "Is that—" "Yes." Mirren slides it across the table. Her hands are steady now. No trembling. No hesitation. "Read it," she says quietly. Isolde picks up the letter carefully, as though it might disintegrate in her hands. She unfolds it slowly. Her eyes move across the page, line by line, and Mirren watches her daughter's face shift. Confusion first, then understanding, then grief. When Isolde finishes, she sets the letter down gently and presses her hands to her mouth. Tears slide down her cheeks, silent and quick. "Mom," she whispers, "I didn't know." "I didn't either." Isolde reaches across the table. Her hand covers Myron's. Warm, steady, grounding. She loved you so much, Isolde says, her voice breaking. Mirren nods. She can't speak yet. Her throat is too tight. They sit like that for a long time, the letter between them, their hands clasped. The late afternoon light spilling through the window, soft and golden, casting long shadows across the table. Tell me about her, Isolde says finally. Mirren blinks. What? Tell me about Grandma Kala. You never talk about her. I want to know. Mirren takes a breath, then another, and then she begins. She tells Isolde about the way her mother sang while she hung laundry, off-key but unashamed. She tells her about the bread they baked together on Sunday mornings, the kitchen warm and flour-dusted, the smell of yeast filling the house. She tells her about the roses, how her mother tended them every evening, talking to them softly as though they could hear her. She tells her about the letters her mother used to write by lamplight, how she never asked who they were for, how she wishes now that she had. Isolde listens. She doesn't interrupt. She just holds her mother's hand and lets the stories wash over her. And somewhere in the telling, something shifts. Myron realizes with a clarity that feels like sunlight breaking through clouds that she's been carrying this alone for 50 years. Not just the grief, not just the anger, but the memories too. The good ones. The ones that didn't fit the story she told herself. She'd locked them away because they hurt too much to hold. But they don't hurt anymore. Not the same way. She sounds wonderful, Isolde says softly. Mirren's eyes well. She nods. She was. They sit in silence for a while, their breathing synchronized. The soft hum of the refrigerator filling the space between words. Then Isolde says something that makes Myron's chest tighten. You carried this alone for so long. Mirren looks at her daughter. Isolde's face is soft, open, streaked with tears, but not broken. Just present. I didn't know how to share it, Mirren admits. You do now. The words settle over her. Gentle. True. Mirren squeezes her daughter's hand. And then, without meaning to, she laughs. It's soft at first. Almost a breath. But then it grows, rising from somewhere deep in her chest. Light and surprised and genuine. Isolde blinks. What? I don't know, Mirren says, wiping her eyes. I spent 50 years thinking I had to carry this alone. And I didn't. I never did. Isolde smiles. It's small, but it's real. No, she says gently. You didn't. They sit together until the light fades, until the kitchen grows dim and the shadows deepen, until the letter lies between them. No longer a weight, but a bridge. 2 weeks had passed, and the garden had begun to remember what it was, and so had Myron. Spring comes quietly, but it comes. 6 months have passed since the letter arrived. 6 months since Myron sat at her kitchen table in the dark and read her mother's words for the first time. The garden knows. She can see it from the porch where she sits now, a mug of black tea warming her hands. The roses have bloomed, pale pink, delicate. The same ones her mother planted 50 years ago. They're beautiful, not perfect. Some of the petals are ragged at the edges, nibbled by insects or torn by wind. Some of the blooms are smaller than others, but they're alive, thriving, proof that something can survive even when it's been forgotten, even when it's been left behind. Myron sets her mug down on the small table beside her chair and rises. The morning air is cool but not cold. The sun filters through the trees at the edge of the property, casting long beams of light across the grass. She walks to the garden slowly, her hands tucked into the pockets of her cardigan. The stone path is clear now, swept clean, the gray stones smooth under her feet. She kneels beside the rose bush and touches one of the blooms gently, her fingertips brushing the soft petals. The scent is faint, but unmistakable, sweet, earthy, alive. She closes her eyes and breathes it in. Inside, the house has changed too. Not in any dramatic way, but in small, quiet ways that matter. The letter no longer sits on the kitchen table. It's framed now, hung on the mantel in the living room, where she can see it every time she passes. She doesn't read it every day anymore. She doesn't need to. The words are part of her now, woven into the fabric of how she understands the world, how she understands her mother, how she understands herself. She spends her mornings in the garden, pruning, watering, pulling the occasional weed. It's become a ritual, something she does not out of obligation, but out of love. The garden is hers now, but it's also her mother's. A shared space, a bridge between what was and what is. On a Tuesday morning in late April, Myron sits at the kitchen table with a pen and a blank sheet of paper. She's been thinking about this for weeks, maybe longer. She writes slowly, carefully, her handwriting looping and steady. My darling Isolde. If you're reading this, it means the right moment has come. I don't know when that will be. Maybe tomorrow, maybe years from now, but I trust that you'll know. She pauses, her pen hovering over the page. The scratch of ink on paper is the only sound in the room. The refrigerator hums softly in the corner. The clock ticks, uneven as always. I want you to know that I love you. Not just in the big moments, but in the small ones too. In the way you visit twice a week and never push. In the way you hold my hand across the table. In the way you listen when I finally find the words to speak. I spent 50 years believing I had to carry everything alone. But I was wrong. Love isn't something we carry alone. It's something we share, something we pass forward. Your grandmother taught me that. It took me a lifetime to understand it. But I understand it now. She writes for 20 minutes, maybe longer. She doesn't count. She just lets the words come, filling the page with everything she wants Isolde to know. Not because she's leaving, not because she's afraid, but because some truths are worth writing down. When she finishes, she folds the letter carefully and tucks it into the top drawer of the kitchen table. She doesn't seal it. She doesn't date it. She just leaves it there, trusting that the right moment will come, just like her mother did. Later that afternoon, she's in the garden again. The roses are blooming in clusters now, their pale pink petals, soft and luminous in the sunlight. She moves between them slowly, pruning the dead stems, checking for pests, brushing her fingers against the leaves. And then, without thinking, she begins to hum. It's a song her mother used to sing, an old one. She doesn't remember the words anymore, only the melody, soft, lilting, comforting. She hums while she works, the sound drifting through the garden, carried on the breeze. She doesn't realize she's doing it until she stops to rest, her hands braced on her knees, her breath coming easy and slow. And then she smiles, because she sounds like her mother. Not in a way that hurts, not in a way that makes her chest tighten or her throat close, in a way that feels like continuity, like a thread connecting past to present, like proof that love doesn't end just because someone leaves. It changes shape, it grows quiet, but it endures. The sun climbs higher, the bird's song fills the air. Myron straightens, brushing the dirt from her hands, and looks out over the garden. It's still imperfect, still a little wild, but it's hers, and it's enough. She thinks about the letter tucked in the kitchen drawer. She thinks about Isolde, who will find it someday when the time is right. She thinks about her mother, who planted roses 50 years ago and trusted they would bloom even when she wasn't there to see them. And she realizes something. Healing isn't something you finish. It's something you live with, something you tend, like a garden, like a rose bush that survives even when it's been forgotten. You don't heal by forgetting. You heal by remembering, by choosing every day to stay present, to keep tending. to let the past be part of you without letting it define you. Myron stands in the garden, her hands resting at her sides, her face turned toward the sun. The roses bloom around her. The earth smells rich and alive. The wind rustles through the leaves, and for the first time in 50 years, she feels whole. Not because the pain is gone, but because she's learned to carry it without being crushed by it. Some truths arrive late, but that doesn't mean they arrive too late.